Well, folks, here we are in the Tel Aviv University, and we are at the Jewish Diaspora Museum. As you can see behind me are replicas of the Herodian Stones, the stones that would have surrounded the temple in Jerusalem and the temple complex, for that matter, as the temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year 70 AD. This Diaspora Museum tells the story of the Jews as they wandered from nation to nation. And when you look at these stones, I thought they were actual, real 2,000-year-old Herodian stones, but they're not. These replica Herodian stones tell the story of the temple destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And of course, this was prophesied by Jesus in Matthew 24 in the Olivet Discourse, where he says, "Seest thou not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." So that temple destruction happened 2,000 years ago in the year 70 AD. The Jews were scattered to the four corners of the earth. So these stones, these replica stones here, and by the way, you can tell that they are Herodian stones because Herod always put his signature on everything. So again, these are not real stones, but you can see the lines over here, you can see the lines over here, and of course you can see all these lines here. This just goes to show that these are Herodian stones. Of course, when you go to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, you can see those same Herodian stones. Of course, my friend Dr. Todd Baker and I will be leaving for to Rome in April. And then, of course, now we're in this area over here where we see a replica of the Titus, the Arch of Titus, that's you can actually see in Rome today. It's the only remaining artifact left over from 2,000 years ago, when these people right here, the Romans, destroyed the temple in the year 70 AD. The Jewish people were scattered to the four corners of the earth. And as they were scattered, they wandered from nation to nation. And of course, you can see this replica right here of the Arch of Titus. And of course, looking at this replica right here, you can see Roman soldiers carrying away the temple treasures from Jerusalem. Of course, what's really visible on here is the seven-branch menorah. The seven-branch menorah spoken of in Exodus chapter 25 through 40, the seven-branch menorah which gave light to the tabernacle and the first and second Jewish temples. Of course, you can also see the Roman soldiers carrying away the silver trumpets. Of course, the silver trumpets are mentioned in Numbers chapter number 10. So we know that the Roman soldiers, they took all of the temple treasures, all the temple booty, and brought it back to Rome. And of course, in order for the Romans to finance the rebuilding of Rome that was that Nero allowed to burn down in around 64 AD, the Romans needed to finance a rebuilding of the Roman Empire. They needed to finance a rebuilding of the Roman Colosseum. And these very temple treasures financed that very construction. As a matter of fact, there was close to about 50 tons of gold and silver that were taken from the temple, brought back to Rome, which funded the building of the Roman Colosseum, and of course it funded the rebuilding of Rome itself. And of course, you know, the Israeli government today believes that the Vatican holds much of the temple treasures down in the Vatican vault. They're not denying it, they're not saying that they have it, but the Israeli government believes that they have much of that. But these very people who call themselves the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 AD. The Jews were dispersed to the four corners of the earth. And Deuteronomy 28 lays out that scattering. When you look at Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 through 14, you only have 14 verses that deal with blessing. But then when you go to verses 15 all the way through verse 68, you have 53 verses that deal with curses. Because of Israel's disobedience, 53 verses that deal with curses came upon the Jewish people, and those curses have followed them ever since. Of course, Deuteronomy 28 foretold the Holocaust. Deuteronomy 28 foretold the scattering of the Jewish people. But of course, God made promises to the Jewish people. God promised them that they would come back after nearly 1,897 years of being scattered all over the earth, wandering from nation to nation, being persecuted and being killed. And then, of course, we know that that ball began rolling in 1897 with the first Zionist Congress under Theodore Herzl, the father of modern-day Zionism. He saw the need for the Jewish people to come back to their very own homeland. And then, of course, since 1897, Jews have been coming back to the land of Israel up till the rebirth of the Jewish state of Israel, May the 14th of 1948. And so we know that this was foretold by the Jewish prophets, that the Jewish people would be back in their own homeland. Isaiah chapter 66, verses 7 and 8 tells us, shall a nation be born in one day? And folks, we know that nation was the nation of Israel, born in one day, May the 14th, 1948. The Jewish people are back in the land. They're back in unbelief in preparation for a future 7-year period of tribulation to come. They call it a time of Jacob's trouble, Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse number 7. Jesus calls it great tribulation, Matthew 24:21. So this Diaspora Museum pretty much lays it all out. Deuteronomy 28 lays it out. Deuteronomy 28 foretold the Holocaust. Deuteronomy 28 foretold that scattering. But despite that, God has promises to keep. And he promised that he would bring the Jewish people back into their own homeland. Again, Isaiah chapter 66, verses 7 and 8, Isaiah chapter 11, verses 10 through 12, and of course the dry bones, Ezekiel chapter number 37. So folks, God has kept his promises. He's brought the Jewish people back into the land, and even though they're being oppressed by many, many nations today who don't even recognize their right to exist, yet we know it was these very people, the Roman Empire, that destroyed the city of Jerusalem. But we also know, based on Daniel 9:26, that the people of the prince that shall come, that would be the future Antichrist. And of course, he comes from those people, these very people, the Romans, who destroyed the temple in 70 AD. He will come one day, confirm a 7-year peace treaty with the Jewish people to start that 7-year period of tribulation. So they're back in the land, but they're back in unbelief, in preparation for the tribulation period to come. I'm coming to you from Tel Aviv University at the Diaspora Museum here in Israel.